This team is going to be legit. Kirby Smart is right now the best coach in college football. They've won 46 of their 48 last games, which is just insane. Carson Beck is such a good player. Georgia is excellent. Their schedule does them no favors. Georgia could still lose 3 games and get into the playoff, but they're not going to lose 3 games. I'm not sure about the 3 game stuff, y'all. I mean, we got a lot of people saying that. I'm just saying I'm not sure. That was Joel Klatt explaining why he has Georgia as his number 2 team in the country to start the season, not number 1. He's got the Ohio State Buckeyes. His explanation is there's veteran experience and playmaking for the Buckeyes, which I think if you're picking somebody other than Georgia, you have to go with Ohio State at the beginning of the season. I'm not sure I'll be in the boat at the end of the season that Ohio State is the better team, but that's why we get to play the years. So Joel is explaining. Joel Klatt has covered the Big Ten essentially for most of the time for Fox Sports over the last however many years. Played at Colorado, and when Fox got their Big Ten package, he's been their guy for the most part ever since. Does a good job with Gus Johnson. Sometimes I think he's wrong. I think he's probably wrong on this one, but I have to say I don't think it's some sort of idiotic thing. I mean, I think that if you've got Ohio State as your number 1 and you have Georgia as your 4, no, that would be crazy. But in this case, I think he's probably right. I think there were a lot of explanations as to he went on why Georgia was so good, but his view of the world is that Georgia's older players are not as, I guess, good of playmakers as Ohio State's. And he made the explanation. This is a good one. This is a real good reason to believe in Ohio State is that a lot of the guys that could have left for the NFL, they came back. They came back for their final season. Harrison did not do that, and they're going to have to figure out quarterback. Now, when I talk to people around college football, people that I would describe as insiders, the concern that consistently comes up, whether you're talking to people in the SEC, people in not in the SEC, put it to you that way, the quarterback is really concerning at Ohio State. That's why I would probably have Georgia as my 1 more than any other reason. When you compare Georgia's situation to Ohio State's, you have a starter in Carson Beck who, is going to be a first-round draft pick. I don't know if he's going to go number 1 overall. I don't know if he's going to win the Heisman. I don't know about that. Against a guy who, according to one person I talked to that has an understanding of situations, would not have started at Kansas State this past year. So, and he's the guy that will start the season as a starter at Ohio State. There is plenty of discussion that Julian Sayin will be the starter by the end of the year at Ohio State. But do you want to go into a playoff with a true freshman? Because that's not worked out great, generally speaking. I mean, you had Trevor Lawrence, and that's it, if my memory serves correct. So it's not an ideal situation. There's a reason why you take your losses as a younger player. But I don't, I don't really have an issue with this, generally speaking. I think the explanations are fine. But again, he went through the litany of reasons why he had Georgia so high. He said their schedule does them no favors. He compared the two, Ohio State and Georgia. Ohio State just doesn't have a tough schedule. You got Michigan and Ohio and Oregon. That's basically it. No one's paying attention to Penn State. Hey, Penn State, come on, man. Like, how many times are we going to do this? How many years are we going to do this in a row? They have not done anything. They're not going to do anything. I feel very confident in saying that. If Penn State played Tennessee, I would take Tennessee to win probably 5 of the 7, but certainly 4 of the 7 games if it were a 7-game series. So that's where I'm at with Penn State. But Tennessee has at least some toughness about themselves. Penn State has an L every time they played anybody that matters. Just, Ole Miss putting them through the ringer last year, that's on them. I mean, I don't even know what to say about it. But in terms of Ohio State and, Georgia, one other thing that I agree with from Joel Klatt was he was very eager to see the two teams play each other for a national championship. I will say C.J. Stroud against Georgia was one of the most epic collisions of modern college football. I don't like to use this term warfare, though, that we've seen. Because those two teams were amped, ready to play. You had a legitimately good quarterback, probably the second best quarterback that Kirby's faced in his time at Georgia. I would go Joe Burrow 1. I'm trying to think if there's anybody else that, I have to say, I think C.J. Stroud was better than Baker Mayfield was in that one game, and probably as a professional, but we'll see. And then, that's not going to be there for Ohio State. They have some really good players, by the way. Their running backs at the top are sick. They're legit. They are really good. But and they are where they are. Ohio State is one of the few teams not in the SEC that can match up with SEC guys in terms of speed, power on the offensive and defensive lines. They have legit, firepower. Firepower is actually not the problem for Ohio State. In any way. I think some question is about Ryan Day. I mean, I think sometimes that can be overblown. The guy is not going to the guy is look, he's got to win a national championship at some stage. I mean, I think that I'm getting text messages here from Ryan Curley, who has been dealing with a surgery, if you're wondering where Ryan is. But I think in the case of Ryan Day, he is eventually going to win the national championship. It may not be at the expense of Georgia. I think we saw a year ago with Ohio State that their number one problem right now is Michigan. It's not Georgia. I mean, they got to get to the Georgia game, and obviously they played great when they played Georgia in Atlanta. There's no larger fan base than the Ohio State fan base. Michigan may have as many, but they don't have more. So those two have huge fan bases, and then probably Georgia, Bama, Notre Dame kind of world, LSU maybe, but there are a lot of Ohio State people. So wherever they go, that's not Atlanta or New Orleans, they're going to be probably the home team. I saw them. I was on the field for Clemson, Ohio State in 2013 season. I guess it was 14 Orange Bowl. There were way more Ohio State people there than Clemson people. And I can tell you, you drove past Clemson and the tractors to get there. So, look, I think Joel Klatt is definitely is definitely a Big Ten homer. People would say, well, you're an SEC or a Georgia homer. But the rationale, my biggest worry with Ohio State is quarterback and head coach. My biggest worry with Georgia is the schedule. I mean, and that's the other thing that Joel Klatt was talking about. Hey, if anyone can survive this schedule, it's Georgia. Well, I mean, we'll see. We'll see if anybody can survive Ohio State's schedule. It's Ohio State, Michigan, Georgia, Alabama, LSU. I mean, a lot of people can survive that schedule. So that's not really an issue there. But does it matter that, that Georgia has, playoff experience, for lack of a better term, national championship experience? It matters some. I don't think it matters that much. Carson Beck's he has played in a national championship game. He played for a quarter in a national championship game. He's played in a lot of big games, and he'll get a chance to play in more big games than whoever Ohio State's quarterback is at the end of the season. I mean, there's probably not a bigger college football game than Ohio State-Michigan until the weekend later when there's the SEC championship game. I mean, those two are, particularly when it's Georgia-Bama, but really any SEC championship game is a huge draw, a massive thing. But this is a time of year where we don't know a lot, and obviously covering Georgia, I know more about them than I do other teams. But there's certainly, from my perspective, some hesitancy with Ohio State as it relates to quarterback specifically. But just like there's a whole, these guys haven't beaten Michigan since 2020. Well, is it 19? Is that right? Because they didn't play in 2020. Let me look about that Ohio State Michigan thing. I mean that is getting kind of ugly if that's where we're at. And I would understand the trepidation if you're coming into the 24 game and you haven't won that game in 4 years, like excuse me, in 5 years, because one of them's because of you didn't play, but um, you know, this past season they get their ass beat, but the last two they did, and they're not scoring. Like they're not scoring 30 points against Michigan, and they this if there's pressure on anyone in college football, it's Ryan Day, and we're gonna see how he handles that. This guy has been a great head coach. He just does not have, you know, obviously a national championship to speak of, but he doesn't have, that he has that backward of a record against against Michigan is problematic, I would say. In 19 is really his only full season with a Big Ten championship, if I'm not mistaken. Because in 20, we can't really can we talk about that like that? I mean, I'm not trying to. I mean, in the Big Ten didn't even play six. Ohio State played like 6 games that year. So all due respect and no hate at all, but like that can't count, right? As like a legitimate period of time to talk about. They survived Wisconsin in 19, and we're talking about Wisconsin here. But in 20, they played 10. They played 8 total games. They didn't play until the week before Halloween. I mean, come on, man. Come on. So I think the pressure is certainly on Ryan Day. And that doesn't mean they won't win the national championship, though, Z. I mean, you got to be honest about this. I mean, they have a team that is extremely talented. They have a team that, when you look at it top to bottom, Ohio State, Georgia, Alabama probably, and then Texas. I would say that group of teams is like sort of uber talented. That's where a lot of your NFL draft is going to come from. The first however many picks of the first 50 picks, I would imagine a healthy percentage of them will come from the teams that I just named. Why? Because they're the best teams. And when you look at the rankings right now, you got Georgia, Ohio State, Oregon at the 3, Texas, and then Bama at the 4. That will be that group. They will lap the field with players that they put into the NFL draft's beginning rounds, and that's what matters a lot. But I'd be very curious to see how much would Georgia be favored by over Ohio State on a neutral field, because they'd be favored, but it wouldn't be significant. If Georgia's favored by 1.5 against Texas, let me check to see if things are still like where they've been. If Georgia's favored over Texas on the road and Alabama on the road, would Alabama be favored over Ohio State at home? My suspicion is they probably would. Maybe not by much though. So I always enjoy these things. I always enjoy these conversations that you get to hear. I had to fast forward through an hour's worth of talking. I don't need to know about Oregon State. just being straight up, I just don't. I don't need to know about anybody past the 14 spot. Probably. I mean, Kansas State. They're just not going to matter this season, I don't think. I mean, what do they pull off an upset at the beginning? Does NC State have any real shot to do anything? And I don't mean getting into the playoff. That would be a huge deal. That would be like Georgia going to the Final Four in basketball. That's not what, or NC State in this case. I mean, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about, is there going to be any real possibility of teams outside of this top 6, maybe top 8, of winning the national championship? It's very curious that someone voted Michigan number 1. I mean, what are you talking about? Whoever did that, what are you talking about? What in what world is Michigan seriously being considered number one? Someone else had Texas at one. I'm not hating on that. It's whatever, man. They were returning a really good quarterback, a team that lost in the semifinals, the head coach who is like an offensive genius. I understand that. Ohio State has 7 first place votes, Georgia with 46. Georgia is the favorite, if you want to call it that. Georgia has 46 votes. They have almost, 7 times as many as everybody else because you look around, and where we thought perhaps there would be weakness coming out of the 21 season, the 23 season, they may well have turned it into a strength at running back. You talk about tight ends. Look, we're going to see. But, you mark my words, Oscar Delp is probably underappreciated right now. But let's just see, right? But you mark my words. Write it down. We got 16 minutes in this scene. Dean Legge's talking about Oscar Delp again. So, we're going to, I think there could be some optimism about the defensive line that is not necessarily based in reality. I don't know. We'll see. But, that's the great part. I can say we'll see about everybody right now. There's just no telling, what Tennessee is going to be like. Does the quarterback up there, does Nico really progress? Is Penn State going to make me eat my words? No, but maybe they got their shot to. We've got Alabama at 5, which is strange. It's like, landing on Venus or something. There's so much new and fun and exciting. And, meanwhile, you've got, I think Georgia Clemson is the marquee match of the weekend going by rankings. They're not playing at night because Notre Dame is on ABC, so they just never get that. It's a big game and all this stuff. So I understand by putting it there. But really the marquee game of the weekend is Georgia, and they're a 2-touchdown favorite. There's almost no confusion about who's going to win that game according to the betting folks. Now, we'll just see how that goes too. But, Clemson is going to have to play probably the best game they played this decade to win that game. And I do not think that's hyperbole. I think that you're talking about a team that just doesn't have the firepower it did. Modern day Ohio State is what Clemson was on offense. Or maybe just Ohio State, period. An explosive offense with a really good defense. That's what Ohio State is now. You got some questions at quarterback. Does Ohio State have a DJ Uiagalelei problem? I don't know with Will Howard, but I don't know that it ain't CJ Stroud. He is not CJ Stroud. And that specific thing right there is a problem for me. That's why I would not have them as the one. But you tell me what you think. We'll see you on the next video.